Welcome to this session. Today we're going to talk around customer success journeys. We have been talking about customer success for quite some time. Over the last few years, we moved from customer success 1.0 to last year to customer success 2.0, and now we are talking about customer success 3.0 in 25-26. As you know, we are talking about customer success 3.0, which talks around beyond ITSM. And one of the critical elements in the entire story is about onboarding. Not too much about transition, but I think very specific on onboarding. The customer is now expecting value realization from day one on onboarding itself, and they want to see impact created by internal or external providers. So this is a question to Prithvi. What are the various ways in which a provider, internal or external, is able to manage the onboarding process successfully?
Sure. Thanks, Sunil. Glad to be here. And I think it's a very pertinent question. We face, this sort of use case a lot of times over the past couple of years. And I think onboarding has become more and more important because of overall macroeconomic dynamics, which are forcing all the vendors and the tech companies to actually relook their whole approach on how fast you are able to onboard and how effectively you are able to onboard. To answer that, I think it's also important to be sensitized to the fact that onboarding becomes a complex problem to solve for because there are multiple functions and there are multiple roles involved in it, along with the customer. And it's just not, a persona in the customer. It might be multiple roles and functions involved within the customer ecosystem also. So you have the customer ecosystem, and then you have the vendor ecosystem. And now it becomes much more complex, and which is why there is a challenge. And you are right. I think today more and more customers expect impact to be seen early enough. And as we have seen, there's a broader spectrum of customer experience also at play. There is a spectrum of time to bill at play. So a successful onboarding strategy would actually lead you to create certain consistent approaches across your organization every time you are onboarding a customer. That's the first thing to tick mark. That are you consistent? Can you predict over time that this is what it will take this sort of a project to onboard, or this category of a customer to onboard? And to be able to do that, you have to standardize a fair amount of stuff. So there may be multiple onboarding strategies at play depending on your category of customers. But for this discussion, let's take only one example, right? So if we say we have identified that we know what needs to be done, and most organizations do over a period of time, that this is what is ideal for us to be able to showcase value and generate a good customer experience during the onboarding phase. The challenge becomes, how do you now enforce it and implement it and monitor it time and again every time, right? So there is obviously a technology play there too. Involving the customer is a good practice. So what we have seen pan out from a successful implementation standpoint is that organizations spend some time creating this, what we call a playbook, and put some effort behind creating the right playbook, right? So whether they do it completely internally because they have the know-how, or they get somebody like a Quint and they help them prepare this. But it's a worthwhile investment to first be clear what should be done, who should be included at what points in this process, because there are again multiple roles. So it's a crisscross. So you have implementation, you have technology, you have the business side, you have finance, you might sometimes have executive management participate, and so on and so forth. So at least 4 or 5 functions at a minimum, multiple roles within it. So who does what, by what time frame is acceptable, without being too rigid about it. So I think, and once you do that, then you try and create a structure wherein this is enforced every time this category of customer comes in. So there is obviously technology allows you to automate that. That's the easy part of it. So once you do that, what happens is now people get used to working in a certain way. and know what is expected out of them. All the roles are held accountable to performing their activities within a defined period of time, right? And you are able to measure everything along the way, which is the key to really implementing a successful strategy and making it consistent over a period of time. So I would say those are top of mind, some very basic fundamental stuff one should look at when you are creating an overall onboarding strategy.
Yeah, I think that's great. So we use two terms. One is standardization. I think that's important, and we used playbook also as a term. Just for the clarification, how would you define a playbook, and how does it really get into action?
Yeah, so a playbook, in the most simplest of terms, is a set of activities which need to be performed by a defined set of roles in a defined set of time, right? So in other ways, you can look at a playbook as a live version of a standard operating procedure. Most organizations have documented some aspects of this in some shape or form, and they call it a standard operating procedure. You can think of a playbook as a live standard operating procedure, that every time this situation comes up, this procedure or set of activities will get kick-started automatically and push the respective set of needs and activities or tasks required to the respective roles. Right now, you have managed to guide people. You have managed to put an overall umbrella of how do you want this to be done. So the lowest common multiple of activities get done every time. Right. So that's what a playbook is.
So is it correct to say that we have SOPs, let's say, documented in procedures and process documents, right? This automates and also automatically maybe triggers some reactions done by in a certain set of timeline.
That is correct. So where the documentation, see, if you only have a defined few customers being onboarded every month, and you have a document which charts out very quickly, and you have few roles which handles, so specifically you're not doing it at scale, then all of this is not required. But where this becomes problematic is there is a volume, little bit of the scale and the number of people involved are more, right? And now you have a problem because you may need, like I said, different onboarding strategies for different types of projects. So you may need different onboarding strategies for different types of customers. So now you suddenly have, instead of one document, you have 4, 5, 6 documents sitting. Now, how will you implement all of these? It also becomes difficult to hard code workflows in typical systems and siloed systems to be able to manage, because it goes cross-functional again, right? So if it were only one function, you could have hard coded it somewhere. So how do you remain flexible? So I think what the playbooks allows you to do is provide a thin digital layer, which gives you the flexibility to create a library of best practices. Onboarding is one example. Within onboarding, you may have a library of 5, 6, defined and optimized playbooks, let's say. And then you may have some stuff, other than that also over time. All of that can be assimilated into a best practices sort of library. And then the automation actually picks up what is the relevant playbook for this situation and then implements it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. I'm just trying to go back to, let's say, the early days. So Quint has been into implementing service management since 1992, right? And those standard procedures on IT, non-IT were created at that point in time. And till now, 30 years later, we are still trying to figure out what is the best way to make sure that the people follow the defined process, and people still are unable to follow the defined process. And that's why you have such complicated tools to force people to follow a process, right? So my understanding is these playbooks would play a very significant role in making sure that the theoretically documented process gets kind of automated, right? And it helps people to do their set of activities in a defined way. And if there is any deviation, that deviation probably gets triggered much before or at the same time in real time, rather than trying to figure out what went wrong and what went right. And the reason I'm saying that is a lot of our customers feel either they have a growth account, right, which means they can grow that account, or they have a recovery account, which means something is going wrong in that account and we have to recover those services. We have to deliver better services, and in both cases a kind of a playbook will play a very, very critical role in making sure that we know at any point in time how my services are being delivered, what's the quality of service being delivered, and who and which team is actually delivering it. So I think that's a very, very interesting way to look at it. So thank you for that. The other discussion normally that we have related to service deliveries is, how do I continue serving the same set of customers? How do I make sure that I retain the customer? How do I make sure I have no customer churn, right? And they're all related, as I said, growth accounts, recovery account, and if you don't recover the account, then it probably goes out, right? It becomes a churn account. So what strategies, as per you, would work to identify early warning signs of a customer churn? And how do we proactively address them?
Yeah, it's a very important one, and it's I think we have seen a lot of variations of this over the past years as we have deployed playbooks. And the areas you mentioned are, again, the most common ones we have deployed playbooks for: growing accounts, retaining accounts, onboarding accounts, and so on and so forth. So now there are two ways we see this pan out. One is, if you already have an account which has gone into red, right? So then it becomes a little bit more of a reactive strategy, but then you still need to do what you need to do. The account has gone into red, you couldn't help it, for whatever reason it's there. But there needs to be a structure to addressing that situation also. It's a little bit of a reaction, but it still needs to be handled well. Because a lot of time, if you handle it well enough, there is a chance that you could recover even from a situation like that, right? And sometimes it actually creates a better bond with the customer if you have been able to showcase that this is how you react in a bad situation. So you could have a set of playbooks for accounts which go into red, and this can be reactive, that again the same sort of construct applies. Who is going to be doing what and what frequency, and who do you engage and what do you showcase? Is there an RCA you are pushing immediately within 24-48 hours, and then you can connect to the customer within a certain time frame, keep a more frequent cadence with the customer and with the internal teams, and so on and so forth. We all know what we go through when an account goes into red. But how do you sort of enforce and create a standardized approach to this, so that now you're able to predict and you're able to drive the best practices? So that's a reactive sort of strategy. I'll come to your actual question, which is saying, how do you now get ahead of this curve? And how do you avoid this situation from happening, which really goes into churn management and a little bit more of a proactive churn management. So I think the answer lies obvious, and some obvious data points are there. And one key data point is obviously, how is the current customer engagement or set of engagements going? So you may be engaged with the customer in 3-4 different streams, and one may not be going that well. So obviously there are data points there. These get tracked at times at a granular level within the project team itself, and doesn't necessarily bubble up early enough so that somebody in the whole ecosystem of managing this customer is able to understand that this is going to go downhill if we don't address it now. So the signals are there, the data points are there, but then what it means, you need a way. And again, it becomes a standard process to be able to bubble these pieces of information up at the right time to the right set of people. So it means that there is a sort of a holistic account view you can create, which has some of these signals. And I used only one, which is the obvious one, which is how the projects or the engagements are currently going. So that is one key signal. The important one I have seen, though, is also some aspect of how is the customer engagement happening. Because a managed and a highly engaged customer actually provides those signals themselves, provided you are connected to the customer and you are hearing what they're feeling frequently enough. So a big aspect of being proactive in managing churn is to drive a very standardized and strategic customer engagement approach. And when I say customer engagement, it again becomes a little complex because there are hierarchies in the customer org structure and there are hierarchies in your org structure, and then it has to be orchestrated so that the right people are connecting to the right counterparts, and then all of this is being monitored and tracked. So that provides the biggest signal, according to me, even more than the project itself, because the customer knows what they're feeling, and if you're connecting with them often enough and in the right frequency, you will know too, and you will know before it becomes red. So that's one. The other is if you see the customer dynamic from a financial standpoint and see if they're actually growing incrementally or not. Because if it's a stagnant account, eventually it becomes a problem account. So there has to be some new initiatives happening, even if there is no ARR or ACV growth year on year, but at least some new projects are being initiated. One project ends, another starts, and so on and so forth. There is still action in the account. Let me put it that way, right? And it's great if the account is actually growing in ACV year on year. There is nothing like it. That's a good sign. But if it is not, it is stagnant from a financial standpoint, and then there is no action also from a new initiative, etc. And that account is amber, according to me, because it's likely to go into a red situation sometime soon. What also happens in these sort of accounts is attention goes away. You get attracted to the accounts which are growing, and people put more attention there. So the moment you do that, this becomes a problem. So the way to again address is the same construct applies, that if you are able to decide minimalistically, these are basic stuff I want to happen at every account, and these are few key things. It need not be 20 things, but it needs to be defined and identified. These 5 things need to happen in every account. This engagement needs to happen diligently. This review needs to happen internally for every project, and so on and so forth. You could now standardize a lot of these very easily with a set of playbooks, and that is how you get ahead of proactively addressing churn.
Yeah, interesting discussion. So I heard 2 things also. The data points, which kind of identifies the health of a particular account, right?
Yeah.
Now I understand there would be a lot of data points. So we were talking data points like how is the sentiment at the service desk level, right? So we hear a lot of around stories around that, saying the sentiment analysis is becoming very critical. Then we have stuff like how is the SLA being met? So we have an agreement in the SLA. Are we meeting those? So there are some inputs which are coming from there. Then we have inputs coming from, let's say, customer CSAT, right? So how is the CSAT level going up over time? And as you rightly said, if it's same, it's getting stagnated. Yeah, it needs to go up or it needs to go down, and it becomes a recovery account. Other elements, data points that we saw were things like net promoter score. So are they happy with us? Are they recommending? And so on and so forth. So there are a lot of data points, and my understanding is they would have a weighted metrics system, and kind of at the end you'll say, okay, this is a green account, or it's a yellow account, or it's a red account. And so how do we capture these data points into a system, and a system like let's say a customer success platform like Smart Carrot? How do we gather all that data, and how do we then churn it around to show on an online basis what's the health of that account?
Yeah. So I think the answer lies in the question itself. So like you said, there are multiple data points you can, in theory, apply to create a customer health score or the customer health overall. So we have the scoring mechanisms and stuff like that, and it's fairly easy to input the right data triggers and so on and so forth, and you can put a weighted average to it and it'll give you. Now, but what I have learned though across multiple deployments is that it is important to keep it simple, at least to begin with. a lot of times people get stuck with just the aggregation part itself, and that itself goes into multiple months and at times over a year project in just being able to assimilate, because data changes, there are multiple systems to integrate to. Now it becomes a completely different project it becomes a tech project more than what you actually intended out to do. So the key, I think, learning I have had is you keep it simple. There are amongst these potentially 15 or 20 data points, we need to distill out what are the, and it may vary from organization to organization, what are the 3, 4, maximum 5 most important signals, right? Like I said, for me, engagement, and I've seen different ways people have service sentiment, SLA, NPS becomes a little bit more still reactive measure, I would prefer, but people do NPS also, and so on, and CSAT, and so on and so forth. So what are the 3 or 4 most important signals which that organization has seen impact its health of its account? And those are the ones to start off with immediate. You can always add more later once this gets adopted, and there is a change management aspect of getting all of these adopted within your own operations team also. So the simpler it is, the easier it is to adopt for everybody. So Sunil, the health score of the account, or the health of the account, is a very standard way of looking at it. And I think even today, even in project management, people do red, amber, green. But you have to look at it a little bit more holistically. You add the engagement piece, you add the SLA piece. Those are not there, those are missing. And keep it simple enough so that it doesn't become a difficult one to adopt, and it doesn't become a difficult one to maintain. And you go from there. And most customer success tools, Smart Carrot included, obviously, will allow for a whole lot more complexity than what I'm mentioning. You could actually do a lot more, but I wouldn't recommend doing that at phase 1. Maybe that is phase 2, phase 3. Once you do this first basic, 3, 4 things upfront.
Okay, thank you for that. I have one follow-up question, and then maybe we'll pass it on. Is that to be able to do all this in an organization, like say for example, get the health score, get the entire red, green, amber, etc. in an organization for a specific customer. Let's say I'm handling 100 customers as a service provider. I need to know out of those 100 customers, which one are doing great, which are green, which are amber, I need to work on them, which are already off the cliff, which are red, and they're not going to come back. So what kind of maturity these organizations should possess or should display before I can kind of get this kind of charting done for their accounts?
Yeah, so I think the maturity is in having the basic data elements structured well enough, and that in itself sometimes becomes a challenge. And that's why I say the basic data elements, because if you try and overcook it, then it actually will not even take off the ground. So if it is sentiment, is that standardized itself? Are you calculating sentiment? Because what a tool like a customer success platform or a Playbook, if you were to do it simplistically, will use that data element as a trigger to then initiate a lot of stuff. But is that trigger actually available, and is it trustworthy trigger? So that's one maturity across. And I think that's why I say keep it simple. Be sure that the triggers are there, consistent enough, because otherwise you are triggering off multiple things the wrong way. So that's one maturity. The other is to be able to figure out upfront what is it that you are wanting to do after you have this laid out. So okay, I have red, green, amber, 50 accounts in green, 20 in amber, and 5 in red, or 500 accounts in green and 200 in amber and 30 in red. What next? What is the meaning of this? Most organizations also get stuck there. So I think the maturity is in being able to very clearly know, with the green accounts, I will go and achieve ABC. I may ask for more business, I may ask for a referral, I may ask for, something, but there has to be an action across all of these three, and one has to be clear what those actions are. With an amber account, similarly, and with a red account, we have already discussed. It is reactive. It is already in red. Now, what do you do? So if you have clarity around these, then the technology is there to be able to, achieve whatever you want to achieve. That in a green account, I want to go and now cross-sell some other service lines because it's green. Is this a good time to talk about, that new thing which we are bringing to the market, and so on and so forth? All of these are possible very easily, right? But you have to know, you have to have that clarity. So, and I think why sort of Quint and Smart Carrot became together is because jointly we offer the ability to be able to do all of this, just not the technology piece, but also the ability to be able to provide that clarity or help organizations get to that clarity, even in one certain silo. Let's say, okay, we are talking recovery accounts, we could do recovery accounts first, then we could do growth accounts later, and that is the right way to approach it. So that's the way I would look at this, Sunil.
So this looks very logical, right? That this red, green, amber, trying to figure out what's the health check of each account and then take corrective, preventive action, etc. It looks very, very logical. However, when I go and talk to clients, when I'm meeting clients, I don't see the adoption of the full customer success track very heavy, right? It's not yet accepted or not yet implemented by most of the accounts. They're still grappling with figuring it out. So what could be the few reasons why, which is something which they will benefit really straight off, they have not been able to adapt and run with it?
Yeah, so a very good question actually. So, and it took me a while to also, and I think I have a opinion now, at least if not the answer. I have an opinion on why that happens. And I think it happens largely because customer success is looked by a lot of organizations as a function. It is a function in some way or form, but it is actually a mishmash of a lot of roles coming together to actually achieve a defined objective. Okay. And that is where it becomes an issue. So if you have sales, you say sales is a function. Okay, sales needs to have its own tool. Sales will have Salesforce, or sales will have a CRM. There is finance needs to have its own, and so on and so forth. Marketing needs to have 15 different tools to do different things. So people are very used to structuring it and budgeting for it and organizing it that way. Now, when you talk about the workflows and the outcomes which we are talking about, which are typical customer success ones, which is onboarding, which is customer growth, which is management, the entire customer journey, this is not a single function thing at all. So now that's where the adoption becomes. So the early adopters and the people who do it well understand this, and then they use it as sort of a macro across all of these other tools and other functions. A preference, and what we are trying to do now to address that, is not go big bang. If an organization feels it's difficult to do this entire big bang, because in theory you are right, it looks all good, but big bang doesn't go off the ground. So then you do it, the best way to do it is to address individual problem areas and use cases one at a time. And over time, you will find that now you have actually adopted it across, different phases and different outcomes. So a good way, which we are seeing now, is to identify, let's say, for example, either a account growth strategy or onboarding problem, and then solve for it in as simple a way as possible, and then get that adopted and see the value in it, and then go to the next one. And over time you will find and eventually get to a phase where now all of your accounts are in that macro sort of view, and everything is covered, and you're sitting pretty. But that takes a while to get to, especially in larger organizations.
And I think this is for Amit, and Amit has been working with a large set of organizations where he's working on onboarding, he's working on churn management, he's working on making sure that the committed quality that we did at the time of signing is maintained. So Amit, in your opinion, where do you see the entire customer success strategy or the entire framework that we talked about, including Playbook, fit into some of those big clients that you are working with?
So typically when we are talking about the customer success, when it is talking from onboarding perspective, Over there, as of now, when we are speaking to a lot of our customers, onboarding is an area, it's where we have seen a lot of growth in terms of the entire journey related to how that you're going to start the onboarding and then do the transition, then do the entire customer success journey. So in a lot of our accounts, what we have seen the growth perspective from the onboarding, that whether you have onboarded the customers in a right manner and how that you're going to follow the processes is what the growth mindsets of the people, and that's what they are putting a lot of efforts in terms of the processes, in terms of the people, and see to it that how this particular onboarding process will be at a very easy way. So that's what we seen this in a past umpteen years. So that's coming back to the questions what I have for Mr. Prithvi. I think Prithvi, I'm just going back to your first things what we have talked in terms of the playbook. So typically, a lot of things is when you are in front of the customers, let's say, there might be a real-time challenges that you faced in terms of the playbook. Yeah. So those particular playbooks, we are also in front of the customers and we have also got some kind of a real-time challenges. That real-time challenges might be in alignment of the data, whether they are able to share the data, it's more on the data privacy and other things. So in case, can you just throw some light whether you have seen such kind of an examples in past where your engagement with the customers and how do you able to address it?
Yeah, so I think there are, the short answer is not really. I think if the problem is big enough, people find a way to address whatever the internal pushbacks are around this. That's what I've seen. See, security today is the same globally everywhere. Everybody is mostly on the cloud, and it's a global reality. So, it addresses everybody's security is plus minus reasonably the same. There are standard certifications which most organizations go through, and the audits they have to go through, including us, to adhere to what are the minimal standards for security. So I think security has never been an issue as far as adoption from our standpoint. The bigger issue for us has been the data parts and the data triggers. So I think I'll go back to what I said in the earlier one also, even when it's onboarding. So where is the trigger? If the trigger is not there, are you willing to initiate it manually, which also has got its own value? And a lot of customers do that upfront. They say, okay, we'll start off by doing it manually. You put somebody and, we will initiate. The action still needs to happen. The bigger point is, are people doing the standardized, prescribed approach every time? And if it means a manual initiation, it means a manual initiation for now. And then you figure out the way. If you have the right trigger, you can always automate it. That's an easy aspect of it. So I think the challenge has been more around those rather than around, whether my data is going to be safe, because the data is really a data trigger. If you just look at the playbook with a broad customer success platform, there may be more, but these are also tools which are already in the cloud from where you are getting this data in the first place. So it's not as if, it's as safe as, your current existing data.
Okay. I think, thank you for this. Sunil, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm going to first thank Prithvi and Amit, and I'm going to also quickly summarize the big picture that we talked around customer success, right? So we talked about three big elements. The first element being customer acquisition, which is where Amit and Prithvi talked about onboarding, which becomes a very, very critical element. Everybody wants the whole thing to be done faster, value to be delivered, right? The second element becomes transition, which is the classical standard transition which has been going on. So these two very critical elements are there in the acquisition part. Then comes the the regular services being delivered. That's where you do a good job, you end up retaining the customer. You not do a good job, you have your systems in red, right? So that's where the entire service management, ISO 20000, Prithvi talked about data, so data privacy, data security, ISO 27001, all those best practices are all part of that big picture. Agile, in DevOps, AI ops, all that we talk around is going into that big box of making sure that we deliver the committed value to the customer, deliver as per the SLA, and meet their expectation and make it green, right? And the third box is what we are talking around is the growth path. He's saying if you're able to do all that, how do I make sure that I continue to grow not just within the organization but also take reference and go outside the organization? And one of the elements that I'm seeing more and more becoming more critical is the human element, right? So we were talking about process documents, so playbooks can automate it. We have tools, which are customer success tools like smart carrot, so Quint can create the procedure documents and we automate it using playbooks, using smart carrot systems. However, one of the elements that is also becoming more and more critical is the people part, whether they follow that or not, because that's been the challenge for the last 30 years, that people do not follow a set defined process, and this is where the failure point becomes, right? As per all reports, whether it's Gartner or all those reports say that more than 80% of the issues and failures are not because of process or technology, is basically because of people. So my question to both of you would be, we've been trying to figure this out, but how do we still handle the people problem? Yeah, even with playbooks, with the whole system, beautiful system that we've created, smart carrot, where does that people angle play a role, or does it play a role still in the whole customer success journey?
No, it does, I think. And one of the reasons why we launched the playbooks as a separate product itself is for that reason, that, one is you have the big umbrella of customer success platform covering every aspect of customer success end to end. And the other is, the people aspect. So the playbooks actually address directly the people aspect more than anything else. Two reasons. One, I think with people, there is a change management angle to it. There is also at some driving the accountability piece to it. There is also a guidance element to it, and then there is a communication element to it. So why are you asking me to do it? How should I do it? So with a little bit of granular aspect. So when you are actually pushing an activity to an individual through a playbook, they are now participating in a playbook along with multiple other people, and they have also visibility on where the overall playbook is for that particular instance.
Okay.
So it also democratizes a little bit the information. So I am doing what I am doing, but I'm not the only one. There are other people who are also doing that stuff. And I can see it because I know this playbook is now 75% complete. And if I am the one who's holding it up, then I am more amenable to actually getting it done, because I don't want to be the person who's held accountable for holding up a particular milestone. So it also democratizes the process, and it also without complicating it with multiple workflow layers and this and that. So you have a simple view. You say Sunil has to do this, Amit has to do this, Prithvi has to do this. This is the situation we have come now. I have received my activity, Amit has received an activity, Sunil has received activity. Now I am able to see both of you have done your stuff. Now I have not done it. Not yet, for whatever reason. And now it's bubbled up to me. Now I will say I'm more amenable. I understand, this, I am holding this stuff up. You have done it. And we know the communication is there and the activity has come with its associated set of information that this is why we are doing it, guys. So it, I think, brings people more together. And I'm glad we actually took out this and launched this separately, because this addresses, even if you just use only the playbooks, I think there is a significant amount of value. And you are right, Sunil, the issue is to be addressed is the people issue, because the activities happen every day. People come to office, they work, tons of activities and tasks get done. Are the right tasks being focused on and prioritized in the right sequence and with the right timeline? That's what this change is all about.
No, I think that was a very candid and open discussion. So thank you, Prithvi and Amit, for your points. And with that, we come to the end of this amazing webinar.
Absolutely. Thanks. It was a great discussion.